They say money talks, but in the private lounges of Teterboro Airport, silence screams the loudest. It is a world where a 5-minute delay costs thousands, and a wrong look can cost you your career. When Caroline Bouvier, a woman whose last name was stamped on half the skyscrapers in Manhattan, walked into the Signature Aviation South Terminal, she expected the usual: red carpets, bowed heads, and instant obedience. What she didn't expect was the man in the corner wearing a faded hoodie, a man she decided didn't belong. She thought she was calling security on a trespasser. She had no idea she was declaring war on the owner of the very wings she hoped to fly on. The rain wasn't just falling, it was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Signature Aviation South FBO at Teterboro Airport. Outside, the tarmac was a blur of grey and flashing amber lights as ground crews in yellow slickers fought the wind to chock wheels and fuel wings. It was a code black kind of afternoon in New Jersey. Low visibility, angry clouds, and the kind of traffic jams at the Lincoln Tunnel that made billionaires contemplate buying helicopters just across the Hudson. Inside the lounge, however, the storm was merely ambient noise, a soft drumming against the triple-paned soundproof glass. The air smelled of expensive leather, fresh ground espresso, and that specific, sterile scent of filtered money. Isaiah Sterling sat in one of the high-backed wing chairs in the far corner, a spot usually reserved for those who wanted to disappear. He was 32, black, and currently dressed in a way that screamed tech startup all-nighter rather than generational wealth. He wore a charcoal grey hoodie that had seen better days, sweatpants, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. On his lap sat a tablet, and in his hand a lukewarm cup of the complimentary house coffee. He was tired. He'd just flown in from a 30-hour negotiation in Tokyo on a commercial flight. First class, sure, but still commercial, because his own jet had been grounded for maintenance in London. Now he was waiting for his bird, the obsidian tutu, which had just been ferry-flown over to pick him up for the final leg to Miami. The lounge was mostly empty, save for a few pilots whispering about ATC delays and ground stops. Isaiah liked it that way. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back, letting the exhaustion wash over him. The peace lasted exactly 4 minutes. The automatic glass doors whooshed open with an aggressive urgency, admitting a gust of wet wind and a woman who looked like she had just stepped out of a Vogue editorial, albeit a very angry one. Caroline Bouvier shook her umbrella as if it had personally offended her, spraying water onto the pristine marble floor. She was in her late 40s, draped in a beige trench coat that cost more than most cars, with a platinum bob cut so sharp it could sever arteries. Trailing behind her was a beleaguered personal assistant, a young woman struggling with 3 Louis Vuitton duffel bags and a garment bag. "I don't care what the tower says, Jessica," Caroline snapped, her voice cutting through the lounge's hushed atmosphere. "Tell the pilot I want wheels up in 20 minutes. I have a dinner in Palm Beach at 8, and I am not missing the appetizers." "Yes, Ms. Bouvier, but the weather," the assistant stammered. "The weather is for poor people who fly Delta," Caroline hissed, pulling off her sunglasses. "We fly private, so we don't have to deal with rain. Fix it." She scanned the room, her eyes darting around like a predator seeking high ground. The main seating area was empty, but she didn't want the main area. She wanted the secluded corner with the best view of the tarmac, the corner where Isaiah was sitting. Isaiah opened one eye as he heard the clicking of heels approach him. He didn't move. Caroline stopped 5 feet away. She cleared her throat. Isaiah didn't react. He tapped his screen, scrolling through a contract modification. "Excuse me," Caroline said, louder this time. The tone wasn't a request. It was a notification of her presence. Isaiah looked up, his expression neutral. Can I help you? Caroline looked him up and down, her lip curling slightly as she took in the hoodie and the sneakers. She let out a short, sharp breath, a laugh of disbelief. "You're in my spot," she said. "I didn't see a name on it," Isaiah replied calmly, turning back to his tablet. Caroline blinked. She wasn't used to resistance. In her world, people moved when she inhaled. "I am Caroline Bouvier. My family has been flying out of Teterboro since it was a dirt strip. This is where I sit. Always." "Plenty of other chairs, ma'am." Isaiah gestured vaguely to the 20 empty leather armchairs in the room. "Ma'am?" Caroline bristled. She turned to her assistant, who was cowering by the coffee machine. "Jessica, why is the help sitting in the VIP lounge? Did the staff break room flood?" Isaiah paused. The stylus in his hand hovered over the screen. He slowly looked up again. "I'm not staff." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Please, driver, mechanic, it doesn't matter. You're tracking mud in here. Look at you." She gestured at his sneakers. "This area is for passengers, ticketed passengers." "I am a passenger," Isaiah said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "Oh, really?" Caroline laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Flying standby on a Cessna? Look, I have a headache, I'm late, and I don't have the patience for this. Be a dear and grab my bags from Jessica. If you move them to the car, I'll give you a 20. Then find somewhere else to sit. Maybe outside." Isaiah stared at her. The audacity wasn't surprising. He'd dealt with people like Caroline his whole life. But it was annoying. He was tired, he was hungry, and he just wanted to go home. "I'm not touching your bags," Isaiah said, "and I'm not moving." Caroline's face went rigid. The blood drained from her cheeks, only to return as a flush of red fury. She took a step closer, looming over him. "Listen to me, you little—" she started. "Problem, Ms. Bouvier." The voice came from the front desk. The concierge, a young man named David, who had been busy on the phone, had finally looked up. He looked nervous. "David!" Caroline barked, not taking her eyes off Isaiah. "Finally. You need to improve your screening process. You've let some vagrant wander in off the street to sleep on the furniture." David looked at Isaiah, then back to Caroline. He opened his mouth, but Caroline cut him off. "I want him removed," she stated, pointing a manicured finger at Isaiah's face. "Now, or I'm calling the airport authority and telling them Signature is harboring security threats." Isaiah sighed, finally setting his tablet down. "Caroline, is it? You might want to lower your voice. You're disturbing the peace." "I am the peace," Caroline shrieked. "I pay $50,000 a month in hangar fees. I own the peace. Get out." "No," Isaiah said simply. Caroline's hand shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Fine. If you won't do your job, David, I'll find someone who will." She dialed 3 numbers. Not 911, but the direct line to the private airport security firm. "This is Caroline Bouvier at Signature South. I have an intruder in the lounge. He's aggressive, he's refusing to leave, and I feel threatened. Send someone immediately." She hung up and smiled a tight, venomous smile at Isaiah. "You picked the wrong day, and the wrong woman." Isaiah just picked up his coffee. "We'll see." The atmosphere in the lounge had shifted from quiet luxury to the sharp, static tension of a thunderstorm. The assistant, Jessica, had retreated to the far wall, pretending to be very interested in a brochure about catering options. David, the concierge, was frantically typing on his computer, his face pale. He knew something Caroline didn't, but every time he tried to speak, she shot him a glare that could freeze magma. Isaiah remained seated. He wasn't arrogant, but he was immovable. He had grown up in neighborhoods where people shouted to intimidate, and he had learned early that the loudest person in the room was rarely the most dangerous. He watched the rain streak down the glass, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "You're still drinking that," Caroline scoffed, pacing back and forth in front of him. "You know that's for clients, right? That's theft. Technically, I could have you arrested for stealing coffee." "You could try," Isaiah said, not looking at her. "You think you're so tough," Caroline sneered. "I know your type. You think because you scraped together a few dollars for a crypto scam or a rap video, you belong in the same room as the adults. You don't. Class isn't something you buy, sweetheart. It's bred." "Is that what they bred into you?" Isaiah asked, turning to face her fully. "Manners must have skipped a generation." Caroline gasped. She looked as if she had been slapped. "How dare you? Do you know who my father was? Do you know who my husband is?" "Does it matter?" Isaiah asked. "They aren't here. It's just you, screaming at a stranger in an airport lounge." Before Caroline could launch her next volley of insults, the heavy security doors swung open. 2 uniformed officers walked in. The lead officer was a man Isaiah recognized vaguely, Officer Higgins, a thick-set man with a buzz cut and a utility belt that creaked under the weight of a taser, flashlight, and handcuffs. He looked wet, annoyed, and ready to end whatever problem was keeping him from his break. "Ms. Bouvier?" Higgins asked, shaking the rain off his cap. "Finally." Caroline threw her hands up. "Officer, thank God. This man," she pointed accusingly at Isaiah, "is trespassing. I asked him to leave, the staff asked him to leave, and he became hostile. He threatened me." Higgins's eyes narrowed as he turned to Isaiah. He saw the hoodie. He saw the relaxed posture, which he interpreted as defiance. He saw a black man sitting in a chair that cost $5,000, looking entirely too comfortable. Biases, conscious or not, clicked into place. "Sir," Higgins said, his voice dropping to that authoritative baritone cops use when they want to establish dominance. "I'm going to need to see some ID." Isaiah didn't reach for his wallet. He knew the drill. Sudden movements made nervous men with badges do stupid things. "I'm a passenger, officer. I'm waiting for my flight." "He's lying," Caroline interjected. "Look at him. Does he look like he owns a plane? He probably climbed the fence." Higgins stepped closer, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. "Sir, if you're a passenger, you'll have a tail number and a pilot manifest. If you don't show me ID and proof of travel, I'm going to have to escort you off the premises. And if you resist, you'll be leaving in handcuffs." "I'm not resisting," Isaiah said calmly. "I'm telling you that you're making a mistake. You might want to check with the desk before you do this." "I don't need to check with the desk to know when someone doesn't belong," Higgins snapped. The pressure of Caroline Bouvier watching him was making him act faster than he should. He wanted to solve the problem for the VIP. "Stand up, now." Isaiah set his coffee cup down on the side table. "Officer, I really suggest—" "Stand up!" Higgins shouted, grabbing Isaiah's arm. The contact was electric. The room went silent. Jessica gasped. David, the concierge, finally found his voice. "Officer Higgins, stop!" David yelled, vaulting over the desk. "Stay out of this, David," Caroline hissed. "Let the man do his job." Isaiah looked at Higgins's hand on his arm, then up at Higgins's face. His eyes were cold. "Take your hand off me." "Or what?" Higgins challenged, tightening his grip. "You gonna assault an officer?" "No," Isaiah said. "I'm going to sue this airport into the ground, and you'll be working security at a mall in Jersey City by next week. Unhand me." "That's it," Higgins grunted. He yanked Isaiah out of the chair. Isaiah stumbled, but caught his footing, standing to his full height. He was taller than Higgins, broader too, though the hoodie hid it. "Turn around," Higgins commanded, reaching for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for trespassing and disorderly conduct." "He threatened me," Caroline added helpfully. "Add assault to that." "I didn't threaten anyone," Isaiah said, his voice steel. "And I'm not turning around." "Stop!" David, the concierge, was now standing between them, breathless. "Officer Higgins, let him go. You don't understand." "Understand what?" Higgins barked, though he didn't let go of Isaiah's arm. "That he crashed the lounge?" "He didn't crash the lounge," David shouted, his face red. He looked at Caroline, then at Higgins. "He owns the building." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Caroline blinked. "What?" "Well, not the building," David corrected himself, stammering. "But he owns the slot, the hangar. He's not a charter passenger, Ms. Bouvier." David took a deep breath and looked at Isaiah with apologetic terror. "This is Mr. Sterling. Isaiah Sterling." Caroline frowned. "Sterling? I've never heard of him. What does he fly? A prop plane?" David shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am." Just then, a deep rumble shook the floor. Through the rain-streaked glass, a massive shape was taxiing toward the signature ramp. It was sleek, painted in a matte midnight black that seemed to absorb the storm's light. It was huge, far larger than the mid-size Citations usually parked there. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, the apex predator of private aviation, capable of flying New York to Hong Kong without stopping. The tail number was visible in silver lettering, N754S. David pointed at the jet. "He owns that." Isaiah gently pulled his arm from Higgins's loosening grip. He straightened his hoodie, brushed off his shoulder, and looked at Caroline, whose mouth was hanging slightly open. "And," Isaiah added, his voice calm and smooth as velvet, "I believe you're standing in my hangar." The silence in the lounge was no longer the quiet of luxury. It was the suffocating stillness of a bomb that had just armed itself. Officer Higgins stepped back, as if Isaiah had suddenly caught fire. His hand, which had been reaching for handcuffs, now hovered awkwardly in mid-air before retreating to his belt, not to grab a weapon this time, but to rest there in a pose of defensive uncertainty. He looked at the massive black jet turning on the tarmac, its engines whining down from a roar to a high-pitched whistle, and then back at the man in the hoodie. The cognitive dissonance was making his face twitch. Caroline Bouvier, however, was not a woman who surrendered to reality easily. Her reality was constructed of decades of deference, and she refused to let a single moment of contradiction dismantle it. She stared at the jet, then at Isaiah, her mind racing to find the loophole, the mistake, the lie. "Don't be ridiculous, David," Caroline scoffed, though the confidence in her voice had developed a hairline fracture. She turned her gaze to the concierge, her eyes narrowing. "Isaiah Sterling. I know the manifest of every major player in New York. The Sterlings are old money in Boston, and they certainly don't look like him, and they don't dress like they just robbed a gym locker." She pivoted back to Isaiah, crossing her arms, creating a physical barrier between her worldview and the man standing in front of her. "Nice try. Did you rent it? Is that it? Some rapper blew his advance on a charter to impress his Instagram followers. That plane probably belongs to a leasing company." Isaiah didn't answer immediately. He walked over to the window, watching his flight crew begin the post-flight checks. The ground crew was already swarming the Obsidian 2, placing red carpets not just at the stairs, but leading all the way from the tarmac entrance. They treated the machine with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "It's not a charter, Carolyn," Isaiah said softly, his back to her. "And I'm not from Boston." He turned around, his expression unreadable. "I'm from East Oakland, and the only thing I'm leasing is the patience I'm currently using, not to have you banned from this airport permanently." "Banned?" Caroline let out a shrill laugh. "You can't ban me. I'm a legacy member. My husband is on the board of the Regional Aviation Authority." "Is he?" Isaiah asked. He pulled out his phone, a simple, unadorned black device, and unlocked it. "That would be Richard Bouvier, correct? Private equity? Shorted the housing market in '08, made a killing, then pivoted to pharmaceuticals?" Caroline froze. "How do you know my husband?" "I don't know him," Isaiah said, tapping on the screen. "I know his portfolio, and I know that his firm, Bouvier Capital, has been trying to secure a meeting with Sterling Dynamics for 6 months. They want to buy into our new solid-state battery tech before we go public with the aviation integration." He looked up from his phone, locking eyes with her. "I am Sterling Dynamics." The color drained from Caroline's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Sterling Dynamics. The name had been all over the Wall Street Journal for the past year. It was the unicorn of unicorns, a tech conglomerate that had cracked the code on high-density energy storage. They were revolutionizing everything from electric cars to, evidently, private jets. The CEO was a recluse, a ghost, according to Forbes, who rarely gave interviews and never showed up to galas. "You," Caroline whispered. "You're the CEO." "Founder, CEO, and majority shareholder," Isaiah corrected. "And the man your husband has been calling 3 times a week, begging for 10 minutes of my time." He took a step closer to her. "He sent me a gift basket last week, rare scotch. It was nice. I gave it to my doorman." Caroline's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. The power dynamic in the room hadn't just shifted, it had inverted. She looked at Officer Higgins for support, but the officer was currently studying the floor tiles with intense fascination, clearly wishing he could dissolve into the grout. I didn't know," Caroline stammered. Her aggression was melting into a frantic, clawing desperation. "You weren't wearing a suit. You didn't identify yourself properly. How was I supposed to know?" "That's the point, isn't it?" Isaiah's voice was low, devoid of anger, but heavy with disappointment. "You treat people based on what they can do for you, or what you think they own. You saw a hoodie and black skin, and you saw a threat. You didn't see a person." "It was a misunderstanding," Caroline cried, her voice pitching up. "I was stressed. The weather, my dinner." "Your dinner," Isaiah repeated. "Right. You wanted to leave in 20 minutes. He looked out the window. The rain was coming down harder now, sheets of water turning the tarmac into a lake. "David," Isaiah called out without looking away from Caroline. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," David answered instantly, standing at attention. "What's the status of the airspace?" "Ground stop, sir," David said. "Teterboro is locked down for all departures due to severe thunderstorms and low visibility. No one is taking off for at least 2 hours. Caroline let out a moan of despair. 2 hours? I'll miss the entire event. Isaiah smiled, a small, cold expression. Actually, that's not entirely true. The ground stop applies to general aviation and standard IFR clearances. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder at the black beast of a plane outside. The Obsidian is equipped with military-grade avionics and a heads-up display system that allows it to operate in near-zero visibility. It's a testbed for my company's new navigation tech. We have a special waiver from the FAA for adverse weather testing. Caroline's eyes widened. She looked at the plane, then back at Isaiah. The gears in her head were turning furiously. She realized that the man she had just tried to arrest was the only person in New Jersey who could get her to Palm Beach on time. The transformation was immediate. The sneer vanished, replaced by a dazzling, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She smoothed her trench coat and took a tentative step toward him. "Well," she poured, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "Isn't that fortunate? Isaiah. May I call you Isaiah? It seems we got off on the wrong foot. I'm a passionate person, you see. A perfectionist. I'm sure a man of your success understands that drive." Isaiah watched her, his expression unimpressed. "I understand drive. I don't understand cruelty." "Oh, pish posh." She waved a hand dismissively. "Water under the bridge. Look, since you're heading south, and since my little citation is grounded, and since my husband is such a fan of your work, perhaps we could turn this lemon into lemonade." She batted her eyelashes. "I would be happy to offer you a ride to your destination in Miami after you drop me in Palm Beach. We could chat about business. I could put in a good word with Richard." Isaiah stared at her. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. She was actually trying to hitch a ride on the jet of the man she had just called the police on. "You want a ride?" Isaiah asked. "It would save the evening," Caroline beamed, thinking she had won. She signaled to Jessica. "Jessica, bring the bags. Mr. Sterling is going to be a gentleman." "Hold on," Isaiah said, raising a hand. Caroline stopped. "Yes?" "I didn't say yes," Isaiah said. "I asked if you wanted a ride. I didn't say you were getting one." The air in the lounge grew heavy again. Caroline's smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. "Excuse me," she said, a nervous laugh escaping her throat. "I don't understand. You're going that way. The plane is huge. You surely aren't flying alone. It would be a waste of fuel." "My fuel," Isaiah reminded her. "My plane." "But, Richard," she tried again, using her husband's name like a talisman. "He really does want to invest. If you leave me here and I tell him how rude you were, it might sour the deal." Isaiah actually laughed then. It was a deep, genuine laugh that echoed off the marble walls. "Caroline," he said, shaking his head, "you really don't get it. I don't need your husband's money. Sterling Dynamics is valued at $4 billion. I don't need investors. I accept partners who share my vision. And judging by the way you treat people, I doubt Bouvier Capital shares my values." He turned to David. "David, is my captain ready?" "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Captain Miller is waiting for you at the canopy." "Good." Isaiah picked up his tablet. He finally looked at Officer Higgins, who was still hovering awkwardly. "Officer," Isaiah said, "you can go. Unless you plan to arrest Ms. Bouvier for filing a false police report. She claimed I threatened her. The security cameras will show I sat in a chair and drank coffee." Higgins flushed red. He looked at Caroline, who was now trembling with rage. He knew he had backed the wrong horse. I think we can call this a civil dispute. No arrests necessary today. Have a safe flight, Mr. Sterling." Higgins practically ran out of the room, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. Isaiah adjusted his hoodie and began to walk toward the glass doors leading to the tarmac. Jessica, the assistant, looked at him with wide, admiring eyes as he passed. He paused next to her. "You're very patient," Isaiah said to the young assistant. "You deserve a raise. If you ever get tired of carrying Louis Vuitton bags for minimum wage, check the careers page on the Sterling Dynamics website. We need project managers who can handle high-pressure environments." Jessica's jaw dropped. "Thank you, sir. I will." "You can't be serious," Caroline shrieked. "You're poaching my staff in front of me." Isaiah ignored her and pushed the doors open. The wind howled, and the smell of jet fuel filled the entryway. He stepped out under the canopy, where a black SUV was waiting to drive him the 50 yards to the jet, though he could have walked. Caroline ran after him, stopping at the threshold of the automatic doors, unwilling to get her hair wet, but unwilling to let him leave. "You can't leave me here," she screamed over the sound of the rain. "Do you know who I am? I will ruin you. I will tell everyone that Isaiah Sterling is a petty, vindictive little man." Isaiah stopped. He turned around one last time, standing in the shelter of the canopy, the massive engines of the obsidian torch spooling up behind him in the distance. "Go ahead," he called back. "Tell them. Tell them I'm petty. Tell them I'm vindictive." He smiled, and this time it was sharp. "Just don't tell them I was in your seat, because we both know it was never your seat to begin with." He got into the SUV. The door slammed shut with a solid, expensive thud. Inside the lounge, Caroline watched as the car drove him to the steps of the black jet. She watched as the flight attendant, a woman in a crisp charcoal uniform, greeted him with a warm smile. She watched Isaiah jog up the stairs, light on his feet, unburdened. The stairs retracted. The door sealed. A few minutes later, the Obsidian II began to move, its lights cut through the gloom. While every other plane sat dark and grounded, Isaiah's jet taxied past the window, a monolith of power and freedom. Caroline stood alone in the center of the lounge. Her assistant had quietly moved to the corner to look up the Sterling Dynamics website on her phone. The concierge, David, was busying himself with paperwork, humming a little tune. The lounge was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a kingdom that had just seen its queen dethroned. Caroline sank into the chair, the very chair she had yelled at Isaiah for occupying. It was just leather. It was just a chair. She looked at the flight board. Her flight. Delayed. She pulled out her phone to call her husband, to scream, to vent, to demand he destroy Isaiah Sterling. But as her thumb hovered over Richard's name, she remembered Isaiah's words. "I don't need investors." She realized, with a sinking pit in her stomach, that making that call might not result in Isaiah's destruction. It might result in her husband asking why she had just insulted the one man he was desperate to impress. She lowered the phone. For the first time in years, Caroline Bouvier had nothing to say. 35,000 feet above the eastern seaboard, the storm was nothing more than a bruised purple carpet of clouds stretching toward the horizon. Inside the cabin of the Obsidian II, the air was pressurized to a comfortable 3,000 feet, and the silence was absolute. The Bombardier Global 7500 was less of an aircraft and more of a flying penthouse. The interior was done in matte charcoal wood and cream leather, a stark, modern aesthetic that matched Isaiah's own sensibilities. Isaiah sat in the master suite, staring out the window at the sliver of moon rising above the cloud deck. He had changed out of his damp hoodie into a fresh cashmere sweater, but the chill of the lounge lingered in his bones. "Sir?" He turned. Elena, the flight attendant, stood at the entrance of the suite, holding a crystal tumbler of sparkling water with a twist of lime. Exactly how he liked it. "Thanks, Elena. Captain Miller says we've cleared the weather system. Smooth sailing to Miami. ETA is 2 hours and 10 minutes. She hesitated, noticing the distant look in his eyes. "Is everything all right, Mr. Sterling? You seemed tense when you boarded." Isaiah took the water, the ice clinking softly. "Just a reminder of why I built this company, Elena. Sometimes the ground is harder to navigate than the air." He unlocked his tablet, intending to work, but found his focus drifting. The encounter with Caroline Bouvier wasn't unique. That was the tragedy of it. He had faced boardrooms that went silent when he entered, investors who asked to speak to his boss, and security guards who followed him in department stores while ignoring white teenagers pocketing merchandise. But today felt different. Today, he had the power to walk away, literally rising above it. Yet, the victory tasted like ash. It was a reminder that no matter how many zeros sat in his bank account, to people like Caroline, he would always be a trespasser first and a billionaire second. Meanwhile, back on the ground at Teterboro, the atmosphere was toxic. Caroline Bouvier had not left the lounge. She was pacing the expensive rug, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm that was driving the staff to the brink of insanity. The delay on her flight had extended to 3 hours. "It's unacceptable, David," she barked, slamming her hand on the reception desk. "That man, Sterling, he leaves in a hurricane, and I'm stuck here. Call the tower. Tell them I have a medical emergency if you have to. I need to leave." David, the concierge, looked at her with a newfound steeliness. The fear was gone, replaced by a dull, aching exhaustion. "I can't lie to the FAA, Miss Bouvier. That's a federal crime. And Mr. Sterling left because his aircraft is certified for these conditions. Yours is not." Caroline whipped around to Jessica, her assistant. Jessica was sitting quietly in the corner, typing on her phone. "Who are you texting?" Caroline snapped. "Stop gossiping and check the catering. I bet the shrimp is warm." Jessica looked up. For the first time in 3 years of employment, her eyes held no fear. She wasn't checking the catering. She was checking the careers page of Sterling Dynamics. "The shrimp is on ice, Caroline," Jessica said, omitting the Miss Bouvier for the first time. "And I'm not texting." "Well, do something useful. Call Richard. Tell him I was delayed by air traffic control incompetence. Do not mention Isaiah Sterling." Caroline collapsed back into her armchair, rubbing her temples. She needed to control the narrative. If Richard found out she had alienated the one man he was trying to court, the fallout would be nuclear. She began to formulate the lie in her head. Isaiah was rude. He was arrogant. He refused to speak to me. Yes, that was it. She would play the victim. But Caroline had made a critical error. She had assumed the lounge was empty. She had forgotten about the staff she so despised. Specifically, a young freelance pilot named Ryan, who had been sitting in the far back booth, waiting for his own cargo flight. He had been there the whole time, obscured by a fake ficus plant. Ryan was 24. He grew up on Twitch and Reddit, and he had been recording since the moment Caroline started shouting about the vagrant in her seat. He looked at his phone, his thumb hovering over the post button on TikTok. The video was 3 minutes long. It captured everything: the insults, the breeding comment, the arrival of the police, the revelation of the jet, and the desperate, cringing attempt to hitch a ride. Ryan typed a caption. "Teterboro Karen tries to arrest billionaire for sitting in a chair, then begs for a ride on his jet. You can't make this up. Grand private jet. Karma, Isaiah Sterling." He hit post. The digital signal shot up to the cell tower, bounced to a server in Virginia, and began to propagate across the world. By the time the Obsidian 2 began its descent into Miami Opa-locka Executive Airport, the world had changed. Isaiah was unaware of the digital storm. He was asleep, finally catching the rest he had missed in Tokyo. But in the cockpit, Captain Miller was looking at his iPad with wide eyes. He turned to the co-pilot. "You seeing this?" Miller whispered. "The video?" The co-pilot nodded, grimacing. "It's on CNN already. Tech mogul, racially profiled at Teterboro. It's got 4 million views in 2 hours." Miller shook his head. She dug her own grave. Look at the comments. People are doxing her, identifying her clothes, her bag, her husband's company. Down in Palm Beach, the weather had cleared, but a different kind of storm was making landfall. Richard Bouvier was sitting in the private dining room of Café Bouloud, nursing a scotch. He was checking his watch, annoyed that Caroline was late. He hated tardiness. It showed a lack of discipline. His phone buzzed on the white tablecloth. Then it buzzed again. And again. A steady stream of vibrations that rattled the silverware. He frowned and picked it up. A dozen texts, 3 missed calls from his PR firm, and 1 link sent by his 20-year-old son from his first marriage. The message read, "Dad, you need to see this. It's bad." Richard tapped the link. The video played. The audio was crisp. "Class isn't something you buy, sweetheart. It's bred." Richard watched his wife's face, twisted in a sneer he knew well, but usually saw directed at maids or waiters, not tech billionaires. He watched her call the police. He watched her realize who Isaiah was. Richard felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He didn't care about Caroline's racism. Truth be told, he shared some of her prejudices, though he was smart enough to keep them hidden behind country club smiles. He cared about the name, Sterling Dynamics. "No," Richard whispered, the blood draining from his face. "You stupid, stupid woman." He watched the end of the video, where Caroline tried to leverage his name to get a free flight. Richard really does want to invest. If you leave me here, it might sour the deal. Richard closed his eyes. The deal wasn't just sour, it was radioactive. He could practically hear the stock price of Bouvier Capital dropping in the after-hours market. He dialed his PR crisis manager. "Richard," the manager answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call you. It's everywhere. Twitter is calling for a boycott of your firm. They're digging up your old tweets. The board is convening an emergency call in 20 minutes. "Fix it," Richard hissed. "I can't fix this, Richard. She's on video calling Isaiah Sterling a vagrant. The only way to save the firm is to distance yourself. Completely." Richard hung up. He stared at the empty chair across from him, where Caroline was supposed to sit. He picked up his glass of scotch and downed it in one swallow. Then he dialed Caroline. At Teterboro, the rain had stopped. Caroline was finally boarding her small citation jet. She was in a better mood. She had convinced herself that she could spin this. She would tell Richard that Isaiah had made a pass at her, and she had rejected him. Yes, that would work. Richard was possessive. He would believe her. She settled into her seat and pulled out her phone to turn on airplane mode. That's when she saw the notifications. Instagram, 99+. Twitter, 99+. Messages, 58. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Confused, she opened Instagram. Her latest photo, a picture of her shoes from yesterday, had 10,000 comments. Racist. Hope you enjoy the no-fly list. Imagine calling the cops on the guy who owns the airport, LOL. Team Isaiah. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. She opened Twitter. The #1 trending topic in the United States was Yikcho Teterboro Karen. She clicked the hashtag. The video was at the top. She watched herself. It looked worse on screen, much worse. The angle made her nose look sharp, her eyes manic. The audio picked up the screech in her voice. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her phone rang in her hand. The screen flashed. "Richard, husband." She answered, her voice trembling. "Richard, darling, I can explain. I've had the most awful day. This man, he—" "Shut up!" Richard's voice was ice. It wasn't the anger she was used to. It was the flat, dead tone of a business transaction being terminated. "Richard, do not come to Palm Beach," Richard said. "I have instructed the pilot to divert you to the townhouse in New York." "What? Why?" "The dinner. There is no dinner, Caroline. There is no dinner because nobody wants to be seen with us. My partners are pulling out. The acquisition deal is on hold. Do you have any idea what you have done?" I was just protecting our standards," Caroline sobbed. "He looked like a thug." "He looks like the future of the S&P 500, Richard roared, his composure finally cracking. And you looked like a relic, a liability. I am issuing a statement in 10 minutes condemning your behavior. I am separating my brand from you. Your brand? I'm your wife. For now, Richard said. Stay in New York. Don't speak to the press. Don't leave the house. And for God's sake, stop talking. The line went dead. Caroline stared at the phone. The cabin of the Citation, usually so cozy and familiar, suddenly felt like a coffin. She looked up. Jessica was standing in the aisle, holding her own bag. The engines were starting to whine, but the door was still open. Jessica, Caroline sniffled, wiping mascara from her cheek. Get me a vodka tonic, double. And tell the pilot to ignore Richard. We are going to Palm Beach. Jessica didn't move toward the galley. She looked at Caroline, really looked at her, seeing the pathetic, crumbling mess of entitlement beneath the trench coat. No, Jessica said clearly. Caroline blinked. Excuse me? I said no. Jessica slung her bag over her shoulder. I'm not getting you a drink, and I'm not going to Palm Beach or New York with you. You can't quit, Caroline hissed. You have a contract. I'll sue you. Go ahead, Jessica smiled, and it was the lightest she had felt in years. I'm sure Mr. Sterling's legal team would love to handle it pro bono. I sent my resume in 10 minutes ago. I already got an auto reply. Jessica turned and walked toward the open door. Where are you going? Caroline shrieked, panic finally setting in as she realized she was truly alone. Jessica, you can't leave me. Jessica paused at the top of the stairs. She looked back at the woman who had made her life hell for 3 years. I'm going to find a commercial flight, Jessica said. It might be crowded, and the seats might be small, but at least the company will be better. She walked down the stairs and into the cool night air. Caroline watched her go. The flight attendant, a man Caroline had never bothered to learn the name of, stepped into the cabin and pulled the door shut. The heavy thud sealed her in. The silence was deafening. The fallout was not a splash. It was a tidal wave. By the time the sun rose over Miami, the video had crossed 10 million views. It had jumped from TikTok to Twitter, then to the morning news cycle. Good Morning America ran a segment titled Air Rage and Privilege, featuring a blurry still of Caroline's finger pointing in Isaiah's face. Isaiah sat on the terrace of his Miami penthouse, overlooking the turquoise expanse of Biscayne Bay. The air was warm, smelling of salt and hibiscus, a stark contrast to the grey misery of Teterboro. On the glass table before him lay a tablet displaying the carnage of the Bouvier reputation. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt a quiet, weary resignation. He scrolled past the memes and the hashtags. He wasn't interested in the internet's thirst for blood. He was interested in the systemic rot that allowed people like Caroline to exist unchecked for so long. Mr. Sterling? It was Eleanor, his executive assistant, and flight attendant when duty called. She was holding a phone. Richard Bouvier is on line 1. Again. This is his 5th call since we landed. Isaiah took a sip of his espresso. Tell him I'm unavailable. He says it's critical. He says he wants to issue a personal apology. He claims he had no idea his wife held such antiquated views. Isaiah looked out at the water. He knew. He's been married to her for 20 years. He only cares now because the stock price is bleeding. Tell him that if he calls again, Sterling Dynamics will pull our accounts from the bank that clears his trades. Elena nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Understood. Also, there's someone in the lobby for the 9 more a.m. interview. HR flagged her application. It's the girl from the video. Jessica. Isaiah's eyebrows rose. She actually came? She flew Spirit Airlines, red-eye, landed 2 hours ago. She's sitting in the lobby with a suitcase and a very large coffee. Isaiah stood up, buttoning his blazer. Send her up. and order breakfast. She's probably hungry. 3 weeks later, the charity gala for the Metropolitan Arts Council was the event of the New York social season. It was the kind of night where the air kissed cheeks and stabbed backs in equal measure. Limousines idled in a snake-like line down Fifth Avenue. Caroline Bouvier stepped out of a black sedan. It wasn't her usual town car. That had been repossessed by the firm as part of the asset freeze during the initial divorce filings. This was an Uber black, but she held her head high, determined to brave the storm. She wore a gown of emerald silk, intended to signal resilience. She approached the red velvet rope, her smile fixed and brittle. "Name?" the young man with the clipboard asked. He didn't look up. "Caroline Bouvier," she announced, waiting for the usual nod and the unclipping of the rope. The young man ran his finger down the list. He stopped. He checked it again. Then he looked up. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized her, not as the doyenne of society, but as the Teterboro Karen. "I'm sorry, Miss Bouvier," he said, his voice loud enough for the photographers nearby to hear. "Your invitation was rescinded." Camera flashes went off like lightning. "Rescinded?" Caroline hissed, her smile faltering. "That's impossible. I'm a donor. I'm a patron-level member." "The board voted yesterday," the young man said, blocking her path. "They felt your presence would distract from the museum's mission of inclusivity." "This is ridiculous!" Caroline's voice began to rise, that familiar screech creeping back in. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," a deep voice said from behind her. Caroline froze. She turned slowly. Isaiah Sterling was walking up the red carpet. He looked devastating in a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo. He wasn't alone. On his arm was a stunning woman in a sleek, modern silver gown that caught the flashbulbs like liquid mercury. It took Caroline a full 5 seconds to recognize her. It was Jessica. The former assistant didn't look like the cowering girl in the beige cardigan anymore. Her posture was erect, her chin lifted. She looked professional, confident, and undeniably happy. "Isaiah," Caroline breathed, the fight draining out of her. She looked at Jessica. "Jessica?" "Hello, Caroline," Jessica said. Her voice was steady. There was no malice in it, only pity. "You look tired." Caroline stammered. She looked at Isaiah. "Isaiah, please, this has gone too far. Richard has left me. My friends won't return my calls. I'm a pariah." "Surely you've made your point." Isaiah stopped. He looked at the woman who had tried to banish him to the rain. He saw the cracks in her foundation, the fear behind the emerald silk. "I didn't do this to you, Caroline," Isaiah said softly. "You did this to yourself. Every time you treated someone like furniture. Every time you assumed your comfort was worth more than someone else's dignity. The world just finally started watching." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "And regarding your husband, he didn't leave you because of your morals. He left you because you became a liability. You surrounded yourself with people who loved your money, not you. Maybe now that the money is gone, you can find out who your real friends are." He pulled back, offering her a final, polite nod. "Good luck." Isaiah turned to the security guard. "She can't come in?" "No, sir. Strict orders." "A shame," Isaiah said. "She could learn a lot from the art. Perspective is everything." He offered his arm to Jessica. "Ready, Ms. Hayes? We have donors to meet. The new aviation scholarship fund isn't going to launch itself." "Ready, Mr. Sterling," Jessica smiled. They walked past the velvet rope, the sea of photographers parting for them. Caroline stood alone on the sidewalk. The cameras had stopped flashing. The paparazzi had already lost interest in her tragedy and moved on to the next star. A light rain began to fall, misting her expensive hair. She looked at the open door of the gala, hearing the warmth and music spilling out. She was on the outside now. She turned to the Uber driver, who was still waiting. "Take me home," she whispered. "That'll be a new ride request, Mum," the driver said. "Surge pricing is in effect due to the rain." Caroline looked up at the sky, letting the water hit her face. She started to laugh, a hollow, broken sound. She opened the door and got in. The story of Isaiah and Caroline isn't just about a private jet or a viral video. It's a mirror held up to the silent assumptions we make every day. Caroline Bouvier had everything money could buy, access, status, and power, but she lacked the one currency that actually matters: humanity. She saw a hoodie and saw a threat. She saw a uniform and saw a servant. Isaiah Sterling, on the other hand, understood that true power isn't about how loud you can scream at a concierge. It's about the quiet confidence of knowing who you are. He didn't need to shout to own the room. He just needed to own the plane. In the end, the tables didn't just turn. They flipped. The help became the partner. The trespasser became the king, and the queen of the lounge was left out in the rain. It serves as a potent reminder. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because you never know who owns the building you're climbing. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Have you ever been judged by your appearance or dealt with someone like Caroline? I want to hear your stories. Drop a comment down below. Let's get a conversation started. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. I'll see you in the next video with another incredible story. Stay humble, stay kind, and remember, you never know who you're talking to.